Hey, hi, how are you? I feel like it's been a while since I did a sit down. And I'm not going to be doing like a regular October monthly wrap up. Well, I didn't do it. And I'm not going to do a November wrap up either because my reading was kind of scattered. A lot of the books I read in October, I provided updates on in the Bewitched Book Challenge, so I feel like there's really no point in rehashing that, so I'm not going to mention them. I'll just talk about what I've been reading recently. The only shout outs that I do have from like my Bewitched Book Challenge is Louisa, Please Come Home by Shirley Jackson. This is a short story in the Penguin Archive collection of short stories that they have for Shirley Jackson. And this one I'd really recommend to everyone, whether you read it in like a PDF version online or something, just on your phone, because I think it was the longest short story in that collection. But I found it so impressive and a testament to Shirley Jackson's writing and her mind, because it is kind of a creepy, unsettling story. It's kind of strange. It creates such a strong feeling of unease, but there is, unlike some of her other novels or like stories, there is no mention of any malevolent event. There's no violence. There's no sort of anger or fury or rage involved. There's nothing supernatural or ghostly or haunting going on in the events of the story, but at the same time, even without having those, Shirley Jackson is able to create such a deep sense of unease and spookiness and creepiness while you're reading the story. As we got to like the apex, I was of the thought, I had like chills. I was feeling goosebumps. I was like, oh my god, this is so weird and freaky. I'm creeped out. How is she doing this? Because nothing like monstrous or creepy or ghostly has even happened, and I think that's such a hallmark of the horror and gothic genre, that you need something weird, supernatural, or like violent and grisly going on, but there's not in that, and it was just a really quick, beautiful read, and I was impressed by how unsettled and uneasy I felt reading this story that doesn't have any of those elements. So one, that, and then the second novel I'm going to mention is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. I've mentioned it a lot in my videos as a reading update, but that was like, it's like my copy was like 700 pages, so it's like a big, thick classic novel that I was reading this year. It's set around the Regency period, beginning near the Battle of Waterloo and the Napoleonic Wars, and it follows Becky Sharp and Amelia Sedley as they leave a girls' academy at the age of 16 and how they make their way through their lives. These two girls are very much foils to each other. They're like chalk and cheese. They have extremely different personalities and ways of dealing with things that life throws at them, and what they want to make with their own luck and fortune. And it's really interesting because we kind of follow their parallel lives as they kind of weave in and out of each other's circles, and they're faced with very similar challenges at like the same times, but they react to it in such a different way. And there's some discussions on which is the more moral behavior, being nice and perfect about it and just letting things roll over you and not being like an active participant in your life really, or should you be very gung-ho about it, like, I'm gonna make my life, it's my future, my destiny, and I'm not gonna let go to waste no matter what action I have to take to get there. So there's that discussion going on, and it's also framed as like a little play. So you open up and like they're doing a little puppet play and they're showing the characters, and all these characters are like little marionettes throughout the story, and that's how it closes as well. And I think it's really effective because the narrator then intersperses within the scenes of the event with dialogue, with context, with commentary. It's very humorous and comedic. It gives you a lot of like a bird's eye view kind of, that okay, this is happening with this character right now, but then he's like, oh, but this character over there is doing that in the background, and it just adds a lot of flavor and depth into the novel and makes it really engaging to read throughout all 700 pages. I wanted to mention this because this was a really nice experience for me. I think so often I like to read a lot of fantasy series and I think we all do, and the reason for that is because, how many times did I say because in the last minute? You spend an extended period of time with the same characters, following their character growth and their arc, seeing these different events play out. You get a lot of satisfaction with following that. And I think as I'm read a lot of popular fiction series when I'm younger. I'm kind of running out of those, but I think now I can see that reading a nice thick chunky book is a really amazing alternative, because you get to spend that same amount of time, you get to see that same amount of plot development and character arcs occurring, and it's just really enjoyable because you just have this one compact book as well, and you don't have to worry about when the next one's coming out or waiting for it or when it's available, this and that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I think next year I want to pick another big book, and every year to come probably I want to choose a nice chunky thick book to read, and I think it'll be really fun and just have it be my project for the year. Because yeah, I started Vanity Fair in May. I took a little bit of a break after I first started it, but then I picked it up again I think in July or August, and I finished it in October, and I just really enjoyed it. So yeah, those are the two touch points from October. Very quickly into the Bewitched book. Okay, so the last week of it I kind of just abandoned all of the prompts and everything, because gothic and creepy mystery weird fiction is kind of my favorite genre anyway. I have a whole bookshelf dedicated to just that genre and those types of books. So I read them all the year round, and I think, yes, I was reading them all year round, a lot in the summertime, and it just really ramped it up as I got closer to the end of the year, and I just think I read too many at once, so kind of lost its charm. So then I decided to skip ahead a little bit and read the books that I'd kind of earmarked for wintertime and the end of the year. These are books that maybe I'd started and haven't finished in a while, books that I think fit the wintertime theme or ambiance and environment a little bit better. So the first one from that I read was Going Back by Penelope Lively. Penelope Lively is a British novelist and winner. Her novel Moon Tiger won, I think, the Booker Prize, so that's probably where you know her from. But Going Back is one of her lesser known novels. Initially it was published as a children's novel and then later republished. It didn't make a lot of noise as a children's novel basically, and then it was later republished as a adult novel, but again, it's not that well known because just of things and circumstances. So this is a super short novella. I'd gotten this a couple of years ago at a charity shop just because I recognized Penelope Lively's name, and I like the cover. It's cute. It's like the old orange spine penguin classic, which I like. And I was not expecting how much I was gonna love this absolutely random pick from a charity shop that I just randomly picked from my bookshelf when I didn't know what to read next. It's got the most gorgeous, lush prose, amazing, gorgeous writing, so evocative and really good at transporting you into the scene and the setting and making you feel what the narrator is feeling. It is narrated, our protagonist is a young mid-20s, mid-30s woman who is revisiting Medlicott, the farm in which she and her brother Edward grew up, and she kind of recounts growing up there and why they left, and sort of this like amazing safe haven that Medlicott used to be for them and that they loved so much and cherished so dearly all these years. And she's kind of going over things and like going around and thinking, but am I remembering all of this correctly? Like, I have these memories and I have these attached feelings and emotions, but how much of that is categorically true and how much of that is colored by what I was wanting and feeling and thinking as a child? So memory and remembrance is a really big theme of this book. Another big theme of this book is childhood and specifically siblinghood, as the protagonist is very, very close with her elder brother Edward, and a decent amount of the plot centers around that, you know, Edward's presence, and then later as they're growing up how that changes. Another big, as you can imagine, theme is nature and pastoral landscapes. There's, like I said, a beautiful description of the farm that they live on, the surrounding other farms and meadows, the ponds and everything, the lakes where they live, as you can see on the cover, like they're playing by a pond, and of the animals and the day-to-day duties and life living on a farm or a homestead. And it's just really, really gorgeous, and it's very transportive, like I was saying earlier. The final theme for this is wartime, and specifically growing up during wartime. So when the main events or the main recollection of the novel is happening, it's during World War II, while her father and a lot of other men have been called away, and just how they're living as children at this time, other children coming to visit from London or from other cities to take refuge in the countryside. The farm is, I believe, in Somerset. Yeah, it's in Somerset. So yeah, it was really impactful, and I really enjoyed reading this. I didn't expect to love it so much, but it's definitely a little novella that I'll be going back to time and time again throughout my life. The next book I read was O Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. I mentioned this in my books I want to read before 2025 ends video. I'd started this a couple of years ago in 2022, and I think I'd got about 50 or 40 pages in, and I just kind of stopped. And the reason for this is not a spoiler. It's like the first paragraph of the book, and it's also in the blurb. But it says, "At the bottom of a great stone staircase, dressed in her mother's black lace evening dress, twisted in murderous death, lies Janet. So end the 16 years of Janet's short life. A life spent in a draughty Scottish castle where roses will not grow and a jackdaw decides to live in the doll's house." So you already know that Janet's going to be dead. And I think because this novel starts with her early childhood life, her early years growing up as a baby and seeing her siblings, it's really difficult to connect with and understand why we're even following Janet when we already know that she's gonna no longer exist and be murdered. So I think that was kind of the reason that some things weren't really landing, and I wasn't able to fully connect with the story, get like pulled into it at first. But this has a lot of similar themes to the previous book I mentioned, going back. Again, there's themes of childhood, there's themes of nature and pastoral landscapes, as most of the book is set in the Scottish countryside, and a decent amount of it at Auchnasoch Castle. I'm not saying that right at all. I should have looked this up. Okay, apparently it's Auchnasoch. If anyone knows better, please tell me. Online wasn't that helpful. So yeah, it has a lot of these pastoral themes. Janet is born during World War II time, so you kind of have that theme following in as well. And again, it's very much about childhood, and specifically Janet being an extremely misfit child. She is a very morbid, romantic, kind of away with the fairies, head in the clouds type of girl. She has very romantic notions of what her life will be like when she grows older and how other people should be. And she's, reads a lot of literature and is very engrossed in sort of the archetypes depicted in that, and expects people to be like that and have like kind of a savior come and sweep her off, and so that she can live a life like characters in her novels are doing. Not so much in the sense that she's waiting for like a knight in shining armor to like save her and like take her to a castle where she can be a princess, but more as in she's very unimpressed by the people around her. And I would say that she is an extremely antisocial character as well. I don't think she has any empathy or affection for any of the other human beings in this book, bar for maybe like two, and one of them doesn't even appear until like maybe the last 10-20 pages of the book, and the other one, that affection is very spotty and few and far between. That character is not it's more of a recurring character, so it's not within Janet's scope of vision. And sort of that affection is also driven by what Janet can get out of it, because she sees this person as a very melancholic and romantic character that fits within her association of what like humans should be. She has much closer associations and sympathies and feelings for the surrounding nature around her, the flora, the fauna, her pets and other animals. She's very sympathetic and has strong feelings for these things. So she's quite highly affected if anything wrong happens in the gardens, or if like she sees an animal injured or like accidentally killed. It really affects her in these ways. And as time went on, I did actually start getting quite sad that Janet's gonna be dead at the end, and I wasn't really like, I was like curious to know how this murder happens, but like what the circumstances are, who it was, how did and why is this being the ending. But yeah, I was just kind of like, I don't, I feel like I want to see how she lives out all these romantic notions in her later life, despite the fact that she's like actually a little bit, like I said, morose and morbid and antisocial as a character. And I would say the whole host of characters in this novel, all of her family, her acquaintances, her school mates, they're not really friends. Like I said, she's extremely antisocial. Like they also like a bunch of really, really comedic characters. And despite this being a gothic, actually not even despite, this is a very darkly comic gothic novel, so it is quite enjoyable. And again, beautiful descriptions everywhere, beautiful words being used, gorgeous prose and descriptions of the surrounding landscape and what Janet is feeling and what she's imagining and hoping. However, I will say by the time the murder came around and like that scene happened, it did just kind of leave a bad taste in my mouth. It does kind of make sense looking back. I feel like these like hints were dropped in and like you can be like, okay, yeah, but I just like, it did leave a bad taste in my mouth. There's kind of a refrain of sexism and misogyny in a sort of abusive and kind of harassment sort of way, in the sense throughout all of this novel. I wouldn't say it's a very strong theme. It's not very forward and bold and upfront, but it definitely weaves in and out part of the storyline, so that's why I would call it a refrain. It just, yeah, it's like the sort of thing about how, you know, boys can be nasty to girls growing up, especially when you're going through puberty. I've experienced that. I'm sure a lot of other girls have experienced that. I think we all know it happens, but it's just so much more exacerbated, I guess, in that time frame way back then, when, you know, society was in a different state to how it is currently. And, you know, women are just probably not treated with that much respect. Not probably, they just aren't in this novel, and I think that's very retrospective of the time period, so that makes sense. But yeah, there is this refrain throughout the novel, and it's just like, I didn't really see anyone speak about it online, so I just want to mention that if anyone's not okay with those things. Not that I think that it's a really strong trigger warning per se, but it is something that happens that I wasn't expecting, so that's just for you to know. The next book I finished was Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions by Edwin A. Abbott. This is a very mathematical and slightly theoretical novel. Again, it's not very long. I read an ebook version of it, and I think the ebook was about 200 pages, so I could have gone through it quickly, but the way it was written was kind of a snooze fest for me, and it quickly became a book that I would read, you know, as I wanted to go to sleep, and like within 2-3 pages I'd completely dropped off. So it was very reliable in that way. I picked it up because it was recommended to be similar to We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, which is a Russian dystopian novel that influenced a lot of later dystopian novels like 1984 and Brave New World. And that was really, really fun. And like the main protagonist in that is a mathematician, and he's like kind of concerned about these things. So I thought Flatland would kind of be a similar sort of novel and have similar themes. It didn't exactly. We are introduced to a world or a dimension where everyone lives in 2D, including our protagonist, and the novel is split into 2 parts. The second part being where he has this revelation that, oh my god, other planes of existence exist, like the 3D or maybe the 4D or the 1D, like, you know, sounds and all of those things. It's just different, and there are different dimensions and different planes to interact with than just the 2D world, i.e. Flatland. But the first part of the novel is much longer than the second part, and they're just discussing the rules, the regulations, the histories of Flatland, and like how it's set up and how women are and the social classes and the statuses, and it's all very mathematical and scholarly. It's written in an extremely teacherly manner, and I think that can be attributed to the fact that the author, it can be attributed to the fact that Edwin A. Abbott was a school teacher, so that's why he writes like that. Yeah, this book, I started it a while ago. I just wanted to get it off my plate, although I am a believer in not finishing books if you don't like them, and I have done that many times, but I felt like there was something I could get out of this book, and it was so short anyways. So I read it, and yeah, it's okay. I'm glad I read it, but like, you really don't need to unless maybe you are. Sorry, I feel like this is not focusing on me. Anyways, it won't focus for the rest of the video. You just have to deal with it. Maybe if you're more mathematically or theoretically minded, you could glean more from this, but I was just kind of like waiting for it to get to part 2 where we find out about the other dimensions, and that was disappointingly short. So yeah, I probably would not recommend. After that, I read, oh my god, this video is already so much longer than I want it to be. Yeah, I feel like I want these sit-down videos to be like 20 minutes or less, but I guess I just waffled on a bit about going back in Caledonia. Anyways, let's be shorter about the rest because I didn't love all of these or don't really have a whole bunch to say. I also finished Saxing the Cherry by Jeanette Winterson. This was also a book that I included on ones that I wanted to read for 2025 ends, and I thought I was definitely going to unhaul it, but surprise, I'm keeping it on my shelves. I haven't bothered to take it off because I don't want to, but usually I feel like Jeanette Winterson's writing can be a little bit too emo, for lack of a better word. It's a little bit, you know, doom is gloom, gloom is doom, woe is me, everything kind of sucks and people are like this. Okay, maybe not so emo as that, but like, you know, kind of haunting the emo in the like female rage sense that, oh, men will never understand how women are, and that's fine. That's fine. I'm sure it's like very resonant for a lot of people. Probably I would have identified with this sort of style better when I was a teenager and was actually feeling those things, but like now I'm kind of like, I just live my life a bit differently now. I'm not gonna look for enemies in everyone around me, and I think that's kind of what sometimes it feels like this is. Not all the time, but sometimes. I think the reason I liked this a bit more was because than the other works of hers I read, which is Atlas and Oranges Are Not the Only Fruit, is because I like the story and the setting. I think sometimes she starts off the plot and it then just completely detaches and goes into like musings and like memoirs and like this happened to me and my body and people were like this. And I'm just kind of like, wait, we were reading something really interesting in the plot, but the plot here has those philosophical, you know, musings, but it's still weaving in and out of, okay, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening with this character. We're following the dog woman and her son Jordan, who she adopted, and she found him on the banks of a river and she named him after a riverbank called Jordan, and she was like, I shouldn't have named him that because now he's gonna flow away from me like a river does. You know, that's the sort of thing I didn't really like, and in the beginning I was just like, ugh. But I was gonna make my way through because I heard there's some fairy tale inspired short stories like, you know, the 12 Dancing Princesses, and I did want to see how she tackles that because I do think Jeanette Winterson puts an interesting spin on folktales and stuff, or mythologies. And I'm glad I stuck through with it because this is set in Cromwellian England and it kind of follows like the toppling of the king and then like him, the crown, the monarchy returning to power, and like those people who supported that. And there's a lot of dry wit and humor in this, which I hadn't really felt in her other writings, but there was a lot of in here, and I just found it very amusing and much more engaging and compelling to read. Again, this is not a very long book. I think it's around 200 to 250 pages, but I really enjoyed it. There were some other literary references throughout the novel. Okay, location switch because one, my phone ran out of storage and stopped recording, but also I feel like the light wasn't giving anymore the way it was before. Yeah, what was I saying? Jeanette Winterson, Saxing the Cherry. Yes, there was a bit that was referencing a poem by Robert Browning, The Duke of Farrow's My Last Duchess. I really like that little interspersed reference. I had fun with it. I liked the way she used it. So yeah, like I said, complete surprise. I liked it a lot more than I thought. I've kept it on my shelf. It did have some of the usual complaints that I have in the beginning, but I felt like that wasn't a huge part of the rest of the novella, so I really enjoyed it. I also read Best of Friends by Kamila Shamsie. I think this won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2019. And I don't know why. I don't know why. I do kind of know why, and I get it because Kamila Shamsie is a great writer and she did write this book well. Like, her writing style, her prose is amazing. I just think she has like better books, so I'm not sure why this one exactly won it, because I know it was just like the entry of the years or whatever, and now she's got more renown and prominence as an author, but this novel just kind of wasn't that good. It's split into two parts. The first half, it's a bit less than half, being set in Karachi when the two friends, Zainab and, oh my god, I don't even remember the other girl's name. anyways, when they're about 13, on the onset of puberty, and it's set in Karachi at their school, and you know, kind of life events happen that kind of alter the direction, the trajectory of their paths going forward. And it also like really ties them, kind of trauma bonds them together. But I would say this was like the most interesting, meaty part of the book that I actually wanted to read about. There was so much cultural commentary and significance happening that I think Shamsie could have expanded on, because I think especially for a Western audience, growing up in that culture and that like very insular system. Okay, well, kind of more interruptions than I thought there were gonna be. Yeah, as I was saying, best of friends, I think the first bit when they're younger and in Karachi is just better. It really explores the friendships and that dynamic well, and like sort of these life events that are kind of affecting and impacting their lives. And I was interested to see how, you know, it ended quite abruptly, and I was like, so much must have changed. But then you skip forward to when they're both like established in their careers and elder and in relationships sort of, and they're still just as close, and it's like none of that event even really happened. Like they're kind of dancing around the subject in their own lives, and I was just like, this isn't interesting. Also their day-to-day lives, their jobs, those like personal life dramas are not interesting. Like they were just so blah, and I didn't care about them. And they sort of have a argument or a disagreement towards the end of the novel, and the way that was like the resolution that they picked was that Shamsie picked was just like, I just didn't believe it. And actually throughout a lot of the novel, like the second part, I felt like there was so much, I had to suspend disbelief like every other page, all the time, constantly. And yeah, so it wasn't that enjoyable for a book, and I was just like, whatever, okay, this is my holiday airplane book. And I read it quickly. Like I said, Shamsie is a great writer. It's really easy and compelling to read her prose, so I read it quickly. But yeah, it wasn't like a book that stayed with me at all, and I'm not sure I would really recommend it out of all her books. The next ones I read were Spells for Forgetting and The Unmaking of June Farrow, both by Adrienne Young. I feel like these are quite popular books, and she's a popular author in the book talk, booktube, book space online community anyways, and I'd seen it floating around. These were good, pretty enjoyable books. I mean, kind of like a cookie cutter, like you know what you're gonna get. They're slightly witchy. In one of them there's kind of a mystery going on in a small, isolated, very localized town where there's kind of magic, and everyone's kind of involved in bits and pieces, and you're kind of calling back to this mystery years ago and trying to figure it out in present day. And then Making of June Farrow follows like a family of women who have something different about them, something slightly magical. There's an element of time travel. There's a bit of a romance in both of the books that doesn't overshadow the plot, but is like intertwined with the plot. So they were like interesting to read. They were really quick, easy reads as well. Decently enjoyable. I wouldn't say it was anything groundbreaking or life-changing. It was just like a good, enjoyable read. So not really too much to say on those. Like they were fun, they were fine. And I read those as ebooks, so yeah, it was just chill. I don't think like I'm dying desperate to have physical copies of those. I probably wouldn't read them again, but they were nice. I would definitely read more from this author. She releases stuff because it's like one of those things where you know what you're gonna get, and I know it's gonna be a decently good time. Like it's an enjoyable, easy book to read, and that's what you need sometimes. The next book I read that I've just finished is Animal Farm by George Orwell. It's like a tiny book. It's like the size, almost as slim as my finger. Slimmer than my finger actually. It's just one of those books that I know so much about. I know the entire plot, the themes, what's gonna happen in it. You hear about it for years and years, and I just for some reason never read it, even though I know everything about it, all the analysis and stuff. And I've had it on my bookshelf for a while because it's just one of those books that you're supposed to read, I guess. Or that's what I thought at the time I bought it, but I realized I don't think I want this on my shelf, and I'm actually not interested in the story. But since it's so slim, it was like under 100 pages, and it's like, you know, quite a small like book. It's almost smaller than my face, and I have quite a small face, so I was like, I'll read it. Yeah, I'm done with it. It wasn't, again, like it wasn't a book that you want to pick up. It's not super compelling. It's like 10 quite short chapters, but like I wouldn't, if I abandoned it halfway through the chapter, I wasn't like, I need to get back to it. If you don't know what Animal Farm is about, it's kind of like a philosophical political treatise story based on a fairy tale, and kind of going about these like these farm animals who have a like social uprising and blah blah blah, but then like elements of fascism come into their established equal society. And I'm not gonna say more on that because it's just Animal Farm and it's done with, it's over with. And now that all of that's done, I'm gonna tell you all the books I unhauled. So I unhauled 4 books. One of them I do not have with me because I actually just unhauled it as soon as I finished it. That was Best of Friends by Kamila Shamsie. I just put it in my office book swap shelf. I really don't care about unhauling books. I feel like sometimes it can bother you when you just bought them and like you're like, oh, I just bought this book and I didn't like it. But usually if it's like that, I will just pass it on to a friend. If I think I have a friend who likes it, I will just put it in like my office book swap shelf because someone will take it, and people have taken my books because like kind of good taste, but I also like don't like every book. But yeah, I already put that in, and that was Best of Friends by Kamila Shamsie. I didn't care about putting that away because my aunt had left that here when she was on vacation. She finished it and she was like, yeah, you can have it now, you can read it, I'm done. And I read it and I was like, wow, I'm done, I'm giving it away. So that's already gone, so I don't have it here to show you, but the other 3 I do. And the next one I'm hauling is Animal Farm. Like I said, I'm not interested in it, and I was not going to read it again, and I don't want it on my shelf. Despite being a very slim book and, you know, a nice cover, I just didn't think it was that good. I think I'd heard people say that it's like the metaphors are so subtle and well done. I don't think so. I think it was actually extremely heavy-handed. Maybe I would have felt differently if I read this like 10 years ago when I was 15 or a lot younger. Like maybe I would have been like, oh my god, his mind. But yeah, I didn't feel like that. Not gonna read it again. Even if it's a nice cover, I don't have to keep it. Someone else will probably want that more. The other 2 that I'm unhauling are from when I did like my bookshelf reorganization. I saw these 2 books and I was like, how did these slip through the cracks for so long? Because I know I've had them for 3-4 years now, but I just don't know why I never gave them away. Like I recognized and acknowledged they were on my shelves, but I was never like, yep, let's unhaul them, even though I'm pretty good about taking things off my shelf if I'm not going to read them again. So the first one is Your Undergraduate Dissertation, The Essential Guide for Success by Nicholas Walleman, the 2nd edition. I started writing my undergraduate dissertation like 4 years ago. So I don't know why I still have this, like, because if I write a dissertation now, it would be for a master's. So this is not going to really help me with anything. So yeah, that will be going probably to a little library near my house. And the second one is How to Master Psychometric Tests, 4th edition by Mark Parkinson. Expert advice and test prep with practice questions from leading test providers. I think this was published in the mid-2000s, and I would say it was actually quite good and useful. I'm just giving it away now because I don't really need to use it anymore. I feel like I've gleaned what knowledge and use and practicality from it that I could, and now I just like kind of need to do more actual practice. And I think what was really cool about this actually is like they have a whole list at the back being like of like pages and links to websites that test on different psychometric tests, whether it's numerical, verbal, logical, all of those things, and they have whole lists of it and you can go into that. Unfortunately, due to the state of the world we live in and the web now, a lot of those links are either defunct or behind a subscription and paywall and package that you have to buy. I mean, this is, like I said, an old edition. When was this published? 2008. So the world has really changed and moved on since then. But yeah, I'm just probably not going to use it. So again, little library. As for what I'm currently reading now, Days of Light by Megan Hunter. This is a library hold that just came in, and it's got some similar themes to some of the books that I mentioned I enjoyed in this video. So, Easter Sunday 1938. Ivy is 19 and ready for her life to finally begin. In the idyllic Sussex countryside, her sprawling bohemian family and their friends gather for lunch, awaiting the arrival of a longed-for guest. It is a single, enchanted afternoon that ends in tragedy. Days later, at a funeral, Ivy is kissed, marking the beginning of an adulthood shaped by unexpected and even forbidden desire. Chronicling 6 pivotal days over 6 decades, Days of Light moves through the Second World War and across the 20th century on a radiant journey through a life lived in pursuit of love and in search of an answer. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading this. I'm excited. It's a bit longer than some of the books I've been reading recently. Yeah, let me know if any of these books that I mentioned sparked your interest, or if you've read them and what you think about them, and also let me know what you've been reading or what your plans are next. It's already getting pretty long, so bye. See you in the next one.